This is a contribution from Kuzu Consult to the Algorand ecosystem by Stephen Sunday and Seth Michael. In this presentation, we will learn how to develop a decentralized application in the form of a web app using the .NET Core framework to develop an online game marketplace on the Algorand network. Okay, so right here I have my Visual Studio 2019 open. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So right here, after clicking on the create a new project template, we're going to come to this window right here where we're going to select the type of application we want to create. We're going to create a web application, so I'm going to go with the ASP.NET Core web application, click on it and click on next. We will be prompted to the screen to select our project name and the configuration for where the location will be. As you can see, I've already done mine. I'm going to name it Game It Algorand. I've set the location of where I want the solution to be, and then I'm going to click on create. So this will take us to where we're going to select the type of web application we want to create with the ASP.NET Core. So I'm going to go with the MVC, which is the model view and controller. But before doing that, I'm going to change this to individual accounts, at individual user accounts. So this will come with a pre-built login and registration process for us. So go ahead and do that. Click on the MVC and then click on create. Right, so our project has created successfully. The first thing we're going to want to do is to connect our app with the Algorand network. To do that, we're going to install the Algorand package into our application. So go ahead and click on the application solution the solution itself. Right click on it, and then let's head over to manage NuGet packages. Click on it. So we'll be taken to this window, but since we want to install the Algorand package, let's head over to browse and search for Algorand via the search bar over here at the top. So go ahead and search for Algorand. Okay, so we can see the package right here. Click on it and click on install. Okay, so our package has installed successfully. We can see it right here. We can also go to the installed section right here and see the package. We can see the Algorand package has been installed successfully. You could also double check via the dependencies. Head over to dependencies and packages. We can see the Algorand package has been installed successfully. So now that we have completed the package installation, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to create an application user class and create additional properties that will be added when a user registers. So that user that registers can have an account address and a mnemonic key attached to that account address. So the user can perform transactions without necessarily have to input his or her account details, either the key or the account address. Everything will be on the database that will be fetched and passed in via the controllers. So we're going to create an application user that will inherit from identity user. Now the identity user contains the fields and all the properties needed when a user is creating or registering a new account, which is the username, the email, the password, confirm password, and every other thing associated with the login and registration process. So we're going to create an application user class that will inherit from identity user, because we're going to add more fields to it, but because you cannot change the identity user itself, we have to create a class and inherit from identity user and then make use of that class, which is what we're going to do next. Okay, so right here inside of our models folder, I have created the application user class, which is inheriting from identity user. To include this identity user, we must include this namespace right here using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Identity, and then passing in these fields right here for account address and a key. So having done this, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to reconfigure some things inside of our startup class. So let's head over there and let's go into the services. So this is what we're going to reconfigure from our add default identity. Go ahead and highlight this and paste in what we have here. So we're going to use the services.add identity instead, and then import this application user namespace into the startup.cs class. So let's go ahead and do that. Show potential fixes. All right, so let's use the using game it algorand.models. which is where the namespace is located for application user. So go ahead and do that. If you go to the top right here, we can see the namespace has been added successfully for us. Go ahead and save. So having done this, the next step we're going to do, we're going to create our model, which will be connected to our database, where a user can actually sell a game or advertise his game on this marketplace. And then every user can either buy or sell games, so it is not limited or a one-way thing. You as a user, you can create a game that you want to sell, put the price, put the game name and the game description. Others who want to buy can fund you to get that game that they bought from you. You can also do the same thing. You're looking for a game, you can go to the marketplace and click on buy to buy a particular game, where you fund them from your account address using your mnemonic key directly from your account, so you don't have to do extra work, creating or putting in your account address or mnemonic keys. Everything will be done automatically from our controllers. It will all be handled from our controllers. So the next thing we're going to do is to create the model. I'm going to call it GameIt models. Alright, so we have successfully done that. We have our GameIt model here. The name is GameIt.cs, with the CS extension for class. So we have these fields inside of the GameIt class. We have our ID, we have the game name, we have the game price, we have the game description, and the user who is creating that game, making use of our application user, which we created earlier on right here. So remember, you must include the namespaces needed. Okay, so using this display name is going to be the name that will display when inputting the fields, or when creating a game. The fields that we're going to fill, this is the name that will display there, which is why we're using the display name. And then to do that, we must include this using statement, using system.componentModel. So these are the fields that a user is going to input when creating his or her game. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to create the controller that will handle the whole creation process of this GameIt. So a user is going to be more like a CRUD-like operation that we're going to create with entity framework. So it's going to create a CRUD-like operation where we can create, read, update, and delete whichever game we decide to create. So for the next step, let's head over to the controllers folder. Right click on the folder, click on add, and head over to controller. So we'll be prompted to this pop-up screen over here. Click on MVC controller with views using entity framework, and then click on add. We will then be prompted to select a model class and a data context. So let's go ahead and select our model class, which is GameIt, for the class we created here for GameIt. So click on GameIt, and then our data context, this application DB context containing inside of our data folder on the project solution. So click on it also. Okay, so our GameIt controller has created successfully, and we can see it in details right here. We can see all the functionalities needed for our CRUD operation. We can read, we can delete, we can create, we can update. So we have all the functionalities we need, but we don't really need all of them. We're just going to make use of a few. Okay, so after this, the next thing we're going to do is to configure our login and registration processes, where a user will create an account and have an already built-in account address and a mnemonic key on the Algorand network. So to do this, let's head over to areas, right click on areas, head over to add, existing item. Alright, so having done this, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to configure our login and registration processes via our areas folder, where a user can create an account or register an account and have an account address and a mnemonic key attached to that account he or she is creating. So to do that, let's head over to areas, right click on it, click on add a new scaffold item. So let's click on identity, click on it and click on add. So we'll be prompted to this screen where we'll be asked to select what we need. I'm going to go ahead and click on override all files and then select the data context class. and click on add. Alright, so having done that, we can head over to the identity, go to pages and go to accounts. So this is where we're going to make some changes to our configurations. Okay, so these are all result pages, and then we're going to go to the code behind of our register, click on it. So we're going to make some changes. You remember when we first started, we made use of our application user inheriting from identity user. So we're going to make use of application user throughout our project instead of identity user. So I'm going to change this to application user. Every single where we have, in every single place we have identity user. So I'm going to do that here and here. I don't need this I email sender for email sending. This will take care of email confirmation, but we don't really need it for now. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And then I'll go to where the email sender is. Well, it will send an email confirmation. I'm also going to delete this because it is not needed. And then having done this, I'm going to also change where we have, let me just copy this and then change where we have identity user here to application user. Alright, so we can see some of our errors have gone, and then we're going to import the using namespace of our application user, which is using gameit algorand.models. So do that. Okay, so I just made a few changes here. We added the algorand.account class from our Algorand Network, which we installed into our package, the Algorand package itself. We made an instance of it with accounts where we can create a variable key and pass in the account.mnemonic key, and likewise for address, account.address.toString. Okay, so this is what is going to contain our key, and this is what is going to contain our address. So whenever a user registers a new account, he or she will automatically have generated account addresses and mnemonic keys attached to that account. As you can see, I've also added the input fields for our account address and our key right here. So this will match when the user is creating an account. Everything will be automatically added or created for the user. So like we did here in our register.cshtml.cs class, we changed from identity user to application user. So go ahead and do the same thing for every process that is involved with login and registration. As you can see, I've done that here. We can see application user instead of identity user. So go ahead and do that for everything that is involved here. Do it for every single thing we have here. And also don't forget to include the using namespace of our application user in all of it. Okay, so inside of our views folder, head over to shared and login partial. We're also going to change from identity user to application user inside of our login partial. So anywhere we have identity user, please change that to application user to enable us make use of our application user together with the user's account address and the mnemonic key attached to that account address. So the next step is to configure our gameit controller, and this is the controller where I am right here, the gameit controller. Inside of the controllers folder we automatically generated or created the other time. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to add this field right here, a private static user manager consisting of our application user through dependency injection. We're also going to pass in the parameters inside of our constructor and then assign it to this right here. Our user manager equals our user manager. Now inside of our create functionality, we're going to create a variable called user. This is going to find the current user in session by the username, and then the gameit, remember our gameit is going to have a user that will create an account, a game, right? So the gameit user now, we're then passing in this user that we're going to find the current user in session. So after finding the current user in session, we're going to pass in the user as the user that is creating that game, because it has to be the user creating the game that is currently logged in session on our application. So having done this, we can go ahead to the next step. So in our next step, we're going to perform what we call migrations. This means we're going to add everything that we have currently to our database, everything that's supposed to be in our database, including our user login and registration processes and our game it model, which will then be added into our controllers also to enable us save whatever transaction we make. So to do that, let's type in the add migration, and I'm going to call this initial migration. I'm using the package manager console. You can see it below if you're following along, right here with the other options that we can see here. So go ahead and run this commands and then hit enter. Okay, so our migration actually worked. We have the build started and it succeeded, and everything was done perfectly. So we can see the details, the user login details and everything related to it, and also our game it table was created. So we have everything set up and ready to use. So the next thing we're going to do is to finalize our migration by updating the database. So we're going to run the following commands: update database, because we just added things to it that we want to update the database to these current tables that we have inside of our database. So run the update database command like this and hit enter. Okay, so we can see that our update database also worked successfully. The build started and it succeeded and everything was done. So now we're going to proceed to the next step. Alright, so inside of the game it controller, I just created a public static method that is void, passing in these parameters. We have the string for key, receiver, the amount, and then the sender address. So this is going to handle the transactions we have. So the first thing we have inside of our method, we have the Algorand API address and the Algorand API token. We're running on the PureStick 2, that's the PureStick version 2, and this is our token and this is the address on our testnet. Remember, we're running this on a testnet, and then we have our source account passing in the key and our destination address, which is the receiver. Alright, so right here we made an instance of our accounts with the name SRC as the object, passing in the SRC account, which is the mnemonic key of the sender. Okay, so this is like sender address or source address from whoever is sending. So remember, when making a transaction, we will need to make use of the mnemonic keys to be able to perform transactions with a particular account, which is why mnemonic keys are meant to be kept private. Okay, so if you have a mnemonic key and you don't keep it private and someone has illegal access to it without your consent, that person can perform transactions with your account address without you knowing. Okay, so try as much as possible to keep your account your mnemonic keys private. So the next thing we have is our Algorand API. We made an instance of our Algorand API with the object Algorand API instance, passing in our Algorand API address, running on PureStick version 2 and Algorand API token. This can be found on the algorand.net and for token, algorand.token. So we then have a try and catch exception, making use of our Algorand API instance. So we have a variable for transactions equal to Algorand API instance or transaction params. Okay, and then a catch in case you come across any API exception error. This is going to catch the error and return this message. Then the next part is the transaction parameter response. The response is attached to a particular parameter. So we have a try and catch also, making use of our trans params, making use of the Algorand API instance the transaction params, and our catch in case you come across an exception, an API exception error, it will throw this error message, could not get params. The next step is the amount. So the amounts we are sending, it's going to be in algos. Okay, so algos to micro algos, passing in the amount that we have in our variables here that were passed inside of our method or function. Then we have a variable tx for transaction. We are making use of the utils method and the get payment transaction. So if you hover over this, we can see address from, address to, the amount, the message, and the transaction parameter response. So we have our source address. Okay, this is who we are sending if you hover over it, we have address from. Okay, so this is address we're sending from, and then the new address here is our destination address, which is who we are sending to, right? And then the amount that we're sending, and then the message, just like we saw earlier, and transparams. So we have a signed transaction. This is going to be a signed transaction making use of our TX. So if that is done, we're going to print out transaction, signed transaction with transaction ID to get the transaction ID. And then we have a try and catch exception error for the last part. This is going to send the transaction to the network. So we have a variable ID making use of our utils that submit transaction, passing in our Algorand API instance and our signed transaction. So having done that, we're going to print out a successfully sent transaction with the ID, and then we'll pass in the ID. Okay, so after that, we have a console.writeLine making use of the utils.wait transaction to complete. So this is going to wait for the transaction to complete before doing any other thing else, so to avoid errors or an uncompleted transaction. Anyways, our transaction was still complete because on the Algorand network, a transaction has it's been completed about 4.30 seconds for every transaction. So we have a catch here, catching any API exception error we have. Okay, so having done this, let's head over to the details page inside of our Gameit controller, and then this is where I'm making use of the fund method. So we have the key, we have the receiver, we have the amount, we have the sender address. All right, so we're still making use of our user manager. Remember, we imported the namespace using and the dependency injection earlier on. So we're going to find the current user in session because it has to be the current user in session to make a transaction. So only the current user in session can make a transaction, which is why we're making use of this user manager. So we're going to find the user manager, the user, by his or her name, as find by name asynchronously. Alright, so we have a variable for key, which is for mnemonic key, and then we have a variable receiver to get the receiver's address, and this receiver address is making use of the Gameit. So whenever we click on this details page, right, we're going to find this particular detail page of a particular game that we want to buy. So that game is going to have a name, a description, the price, and the user who created that game that he or she wants to sell, which is why we're making use of the Gameit.user.account address. So we're going to find the address of the receiver of that particular user who wants to sell his game, and then the amount is going to be the Gameit.game price, so the price that the user wants to sell his or her game, so which is why we're passing in the price here. And then sender address, of course, we're going to find the current user in session by making use of this user here. So the sender address should come from the current user in session, so user.account address. And then we have our fund method passing in the necessary parameters, the key, the receiver, the amount, and then the sender address. The method, remember, is static, which is why we can just pass in the fund method inside of our controller. So whenever we head over to this details page, this fund method will also run together at the same time for the page to open, and then the transaction will be processed immediately. So having done this, let's head over to our debug and start the application to run it. So head over to debug and start without debugging. Okay, so we have our application up and running. I'm going to go ahead and register. So click on the register link to head over there to register. So I'm going to fill in my details and log in as a user. Okay, so filling your details and log in as a user. I have logged in successfully as user 1. Alright, so I'm going to navigate my way to Gameit. Alright, which is the name of the controller, and this is my account address, right, that I passed in from the index view right here. So I'm going to find the user by name and then print out the account address as user account address in a view back into the front end. So if I head over to the index page of Gameit, I will be able to see where I passed in the view back there. Okay, so we can see our view back dot address here instead of a h1 tag. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce that. I'm going to make it a h4 tag so it will appear smaller. Okay, so change it to h4. I'm going to go ahead and copy this because I'm going to make use of something similar. So go ahead and do that if you're following along. Head over to the details page. Remember, this details page is a page that we assigned for the payment. So I'm going to go ahead and add this here. I'm going to replace what I copied with what we have here inside of the h1 tag. Okay, so right where the viewbag is, I'm going to change it from viewbag.address to viewbag.success because this should be a success message that should be printed out from our back end whenever we hit this page, because this is the page that is responsible for performing the transaction because of our fund method, the static method that we added by doing this, the fund method right here. So I'm going to say I'm going to pass in the viewbag just after the fund method. So this is going to be viewbag dot success equals transaction was successful. Okay, yeah, so we can leave it as this. So whenever we hit the details page, we can then see this transaction was successful message upon the creation or opening of that page when our transaction is complete. So having done this, let's go ahead and test the project. Head over to debug and click on start without debugging. Okay, so our application is up and running. We can see the home page. So let's go ahead and navigate to the Game8 controller. Okay, so we can see our account address right here. So go ahead and copy it and head over to the Algorand Testnet on the blockchain. Okay, so ensure you're on the testnet here, not mainnet or betanet. We're running on the testnet for this project sample. So paste the account address you copied and hit the search button. This is going to give us details concerning the account address we have. Okay, so we can see our balances. We have 0 algos. We have not funded the account address yet. So to do that, head over to bank.testnet.algorand.network. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this so we can input our account address to fund it using the Algorand dispenser. So this is still on the testnet, the bank.testnet, because we are running our application on testnet. Go ahead and check the I am not a robot checkbox and then paste your account address inside this field here and then hit on the dispense button. Okay, so we can see a code status of 200, which means success. And by the time we head back to our Algorand testnet, Algo Explorer, we should see a transaction. Yes, we can see it's about 30 seconds ago. 100 algos was funded into this account address. So this particular account address and this particular user has 100 algos. Okay, so we're going to use user 1 to buy a game from another user. So I'm going to go ahead and log out and log in as user 2 and then create the game that we want to sell with user 2 and then log back in with user 1 to buy that game. So go ahead and click on the logout button that we can see here to log out. Okay, so we have logged out successfully. Let's head back to register once more and register as a new user. Okay, so here I am. This is the email user2@gmail.com. Go ahead and put your password if you're following along and click on register. Okay, so we have successfully registered. So let's head back to Game8 and create a new game. So this is going to be Need for Speed, and then the price is going to be about 30 algos, and then Need for Speed 2 game. Very fun. Just put in the description. That will be captivating. Alright, after doing that, click on create to create this particular game input field. So hit on the create button. Okay, so right here we can see the game name, the price, and the game description. Note that this is in algos, so we're referring to 30 algos over here. We can also edit the game, head over to the details, which I'm going to change shortly after. We can also delete the game. Okay, so head back into the index page inside of the game its controller and the folder right here. Let's navigate or find our way to where this place is for the price. So let's signify that this is in Algos. So go ahead and after the brackets, so go ahead and add Algos after the game price, that's the price of the game, to signify that we're dealing with Algos. Then down below right here, we do not want just any user to see the edit and delete functionalities or even the routes. So we want it to be limited to only the owner of that game. So let's configure that in the next step. Alright, so let's go ahead and configure this. We have an if statement, that is if the current user in session, that's using the user.identity.name, we're going to get the name of the current user in session. If it matches with the user that created this particular game that we have, then that user should be able to see the edit and delete functionality. Else, the buy game should display. So we just have the buy game outside of our if statement right here. So let's also head over to the game it and then include this particular statement that we have here by including using the lambda expression x to x.user, so we can also get the current user in session that would match with that of what we have here from the item.user.username. So having done this, let's head back to our application on the web and test it out. Head over to debug and start with our debugging. Okay, so back inside of our application, I'm going to go ahead and copy this account address. This is the account address of user2, and I have another testnet.algo.explorer.io opened, still running on the testnet. So I'm going to go ahead and open the account details of this particular account address on the Algo Explorer, so we can view transactions that have been made from or to the account. Okay, so we can see the account address and the balances. We have 0. So by the time we fund or buy a game with our user 1, we should be able to fund this particular account address 30 algos because of the game that we have over here. So let's go ahead and log out and then log in. I'm going to log in as user 1. Alright, so I'm going to navigate my way to the game it. Okay, so we can, because user 1 is not the owner of this particular game, which is why we can't see the other details like edit and delete, which is what we wanted to achieve. So now let's go ahead and click on buy game to actually buy the game. Okay, so I think we have successfully bought the game because the page has successfully opened and we can see our transaction was successful message right here. So we can head back into here. So we can see, yes, our transaction actually worked 2 times because I ran it twice. So if I go back again and click on buy game once more, it's going to now be 3 times that we have done the transaction 3 times. So let's still head here. We should have another 30. Yes, so our transaction was successful. Alright, and we've been funded 90 algos. So we'll head back to this account that funded it. We should have less than about 20 algos, less than 20 algos, less than 10 algos, thereabout. So let's get the transaction details or the balances of this particular account. So we can see a list of transactions. Yes, we have about 9.997 algos left in this account. So our transaction was successful. So take note, Inside of the game, it's details controller that is responsible for purchasing a game. I included this statement right here for including the user, making use of the lambda expression with x, passing in x.user. So at this stage, we have successfully completed what we wanted to do. So you can create a game as a user, you can buy a game as a user, someone else can come buy your game, and so on. It continues like that. So we have successfully completed a game marketplace on the Algorand network. Alright, so one last thing to do just before the details method, let's go ahead and authorize this particular method so that a user has to be logged in or authorized before he or she can go to this details page. So add the authorize and add the using the namespace for authorize. Go ahead and add the namespace using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authorization. So having done that, a user can only access that details page when he or she is registered or logged in. This is a contribution from Kuzu Consults by Stephen Sunday and Seth Michael.